Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good day, wherever you're joining us from. My name is Aslam Bulbulia. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator at SFU Center for Comparative Muslim Studies. It's our great pleasure to be hosting you today from wherever you're joining from. I am joining from the land of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. This land acknowledgement is done as part of a recognition that these lands are unceded, and to be on this land is part of the ongoing act of colonialism that has been occurring in Canada for at least the last 150 years. It's a good reminder for us that in the work that we do and in the land that we're on, we need to respect and pay tribute and work towards Indigenous sovereignty. With that, it's my pleasure to welcome today's guest, which is Naila Al Atrash, who will be talking to us about art against violence and oppression. Before Naila addresses us, I'd like to introduce the Center for Comparative Muslim Studies Interim Director, Dr. Azadeh.
Thank you so much, Aslam. Thank you, Naila, for joining us today. I'd like to begin by thanking the Scholars at Risk program for all the wonderful work that they do and for making this introduction to Naila. Naila Al Atrash is a Syrian director, actor, and scholar of Arab theater. She's had an illustrious career, over 4 decades of experience directing and acting in various productions around the world. She was the head of the acting department at the Damascus Higher Institute of Theater Arts. In 2012, she was forced to leave Syria, and since 2013 has been residing in New York, where she teaches at the Tisch School of the Arts at NYU. We're absolutely delighted, Naila, that you are joining us today and that you will be talking about the importance of art against violence and oppression within the context of Syria and the Syrian uprising, especially as we mark the 10th year anniversary of the uprising. Welcome, Naila.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to share some thoughts of my country, to share some thoughts about the art, about theater, about myself. So I really feel very much grateful to that and to share wider audiences about something that is happening and is taking place in Syria now. The art, we are going to speak about art. There are no limits to that. So allow me to start with these words. Imagine leaving your home on a moment's notice with some clothes, a few sketches, and a CD filled with a handful of 20,000 political cartoons you had drawn over the past 50 years. In 2011, the Syrian cartoonist Ali Farzad left Damascus in such circumstances after he was badly beaten and attacked by the Assad regime security apparatus, and having his hands broken. Actually, they broke his fingers one by one. And that's how Farzad joined the countless number of Syrian artists who could no longer remain in Syria because of the increasing violence of the Assad regime. This month, March, marks the 10th anniversary of the Syrian Revolution, when the Syrian people revolted against the repressive regime of Bashar al-Assad, demanding freedom, dignity, and democracy. Actually, the core demands of the Syrian people were the release of all political prisoners, the end of the state of emergency, the amendment of some articles in the Constitution, mainly the article number 8, which defines the Ba'ath party as the only ruling party in the country. There were many other details and many other demands, but these were the core of these demands. During these 10 years, it seemed that there is nothing in the world imaginable, nothing that
Apologies, it seems that Naila's connection has failed, so we'll just be on standby until Naila rejoins us. Perhaps while Naila is away, we'll share some of the images from the Syrian Revolution, some of the art that speaks against violence and oppression that Naila will be speaking to, but also wanted you to have a chance to have a look at in order to take your own impression from it. So as Naila mentioned, this is the work of Ali Fawzat, the cartoonist who had his hands broken by the Assad regime, and some of the work that he's done. On the slide is some of the graffiti that emerged as part of the activism and art activism during the revolution. Next, we have some photography. Photo of a Damascene young man and a photo by Amr al-Hamwi. Naila might speak to some of these photos in more detail, but also wanted to give you the chance to absorb them and interpret them for yourself. And here are some sculptures that were produced during this time. I see that Naila has been able to rejoin us. Audio is just connecting, so we should have Naila just back with us in a few moments. Okay, Naila, your audio hasn't returned as yet, but we can see you. We just showed a couple of the images that you might speak to while you were away. I think we should be able to hear you now, but you might be on mute.
You will need to unmute yourself, Naila.
Yes.
There we go. Perfect.
Yeah, but welcome I don't know what happened.
I think it might have been an internet connection issue, but we can hear you now and feel free to continue.
Okay, thank you. I'm so sorry. So we were talking about the 10 years of the Syrian uprising, of the Syrian revolution. And during these 10 years, it seemed that there is nothing in the world imaginable, nothing that the Syrian people have experienced or witnessed, from the most evil and inhumane to the most courageous and generous acts. Sorrow and grief and despair and hope and resilience and love. We have experienced that all and more. And sometimes at the same time, as a result, Syrians were scattered all over the world, left their countries. Some chose to be exiled, to choose their exile. Others were forced into being exiled, forced to leave the country, but both ended up by being scattered all over the world, living in different parts in the world in what became their adopted homes. And by that, even the concept home for the Syrians started to acquire new meaning. What is home for me, for example? My home is Syria, but which Syria? Syria that I know has no existence other than in my mind, in my head. Syria I left 8 years ago is not the Syria today. I left 8 years ago. I was forced to leave. And I started my life in exile. At home, I was threatened. In exile, I have repeatedly been asked, as a Syrian artist, what do you do in face of violence? The question confused me. But it didn't take long to answer it, because as an artist, I have devoted all my life to rejecting a climate of fear. I see arts as a way of engaging socially and politically with the issues that shape our life. In my past work, I tried and strived to create a solidarity among my fellow Syrians in face of government persecution. Despite the threat, despite the censorship, theater and activism for me have always been one and the same. And making performances by its very nature is political. Once you put something on stage in front of and or amongst people, you are engaging with a dialogue with the world and a dialogue with the world. And as a director, when I focus on a specific subject on the stage, that is a political decision. And when anyone choose to focus on aesthetics, for example, only, that is also a political decision. I don't see politics as a separate thing, you know. That's why my answer to this repeated question was and is, I continue doing what I've been doing until now. This is a part of my responsibility as an artist. And perhaps it's the only way to cope with the difficulties I face on daily basis, living or experiencing the living in a new culture, and the challenges to stay connected with my culture of origin. I was one among many Syrians, many Syrian artists in this, but I didn't come to this realization very easily. In my first days of exile, I was like a jumble of contradiction. I woke up every morning, almost every morning, to questions ranging from what am I here to do, to is what I'm doing contribute in a way or another to the just cause of my people? I hardly could escape the feeling of guilt. What it means to seek your own safety while everyone back there is not. I was filled with shame for leaving friends and family, facing one of the most brutal extermination, assault against mankind and land. And I was battling, I kept battling with these feelings that sometimes paralyzed me and prevented me from being entirely engaged with my work. Though teaching and being in contact with students were of a great help, but my true healing came with performing forbidden monologues. Forbidden monologues, a performance which was inspired by the true story of fellow scholars at risk. I made a collage between two of these stories while adding some details of my own. Performing these monologues, touring with them in different cities, engaging in dialogues with various audiences helped me on both personal and political levels. It helped reminding me of my capacity for resistance and creativity. It made me acquire a kind of consciousness about my work and the nature of the work in exile, and how can I turn it into something predictable, into something fruitful, productive to my people. Later, with the escalation of violence in my country. And with the sharp increase in number of refugees, I was desperate to see how the world is dealing and with the Syrian problem, how the world is merely watching the burning of my country and hardly considering the scope of a tragedy, the scope of the Syrian tragedy. I was desperate to see those tragedies turned into ordinary news that no longer shock, which is by itself something shocking. We were turned, Syrians were turned into numbers in news reports. So I felt the need, the urge to bring these stories out into the open and let the world know that these stories happen to people with names, with lives, with history, with ambitions, with dreams. These stories don't happen to people without names, don't happen to mere numbers. And here again, the theater came to my rescue. The theater, with its capacity, of course, to convey the story with all its dimension. Because, you know, it's one thing to hear or to read about a genocide. It's quite another to see it visualized through the actor, the choices the actor makes in words and gestures and intonation, what make this experience a living one, what make this experience lodge in the consciousness of the spectator. And as I said again, that I was one among many and many Syrian artists to realize the importance of art as a weapon, as a tool for survival and resistance. And actually, Syrian artists, long before the war, long before the revolution, have attempted to open up spaces of inquiry in the midst of this state of emergency in our country by their productions that addresses the basic questions about leadership, about systems of power, about corruption in politics, about the identity, in particular identity, as Professor Zeiter mentioned in his book, The Political Performance in Syria, that the artists raised the question, who have we become, we the Syrians, under the repressive regime that render his people into deaf and dumb? And since 2011, when the revolution started, the artists were quick to join the revolution. Since the first day of the revolution, artists have been forming collectives of art, collectives of all fields of the arts, of paintings, of photography, of digital illustration, of art installation, cartoons, graffiti, film, theater. They have formed a kind of movement, and they spearheaded a growing movement that encouraged debates, dialogues, contestation, that encouraged the whole Syrian people, even the people with no previous experience in arts, started to discover their artistic talent, their artistic nature. And across all Syria's cities and towns, people were trying to explore their own visual expressions. As we can see now, I will leave you with a number of these productions of the artists. And I think just have a glance on them, perhaps the title, reading the title and relating it to the production, perhaps we will be able to interpret what the Syrians were trying to do through these great productions. The prison, this should have the name, right? Yes, this one, the prison. In woman, if I want, it's the woman, but it says in Arabic, إن في المرأة تكتمل ظهور الحقيقة. In woman, the truth reveals. or reveals itself. Yes, the graffiti. لكن I'm going, but my soul will stay here. Yes, can we see another photography? And these must be some activists who try to make some puppet theater for these displaced, I guess, children. So yes, another artistic group that I want to talk about, it's the anonymous puppet group, Masasat al-Mati, we call it, or Top Goon, which emerged as an important site of creative activism during the uprising. This group started by using the finger puppets, as they were more easier to be smuggled through checkpoints. Through fun, humor, and satire, this group tried to tell stories and to send important messages about the violence happening in Syria, about the corrosiveness of the tyranny, the power. And in about 34 episodes, this group succeeded in breaking the barriers of fear by removing the God-like aura around Assad, around the President Assad, by portraying him as a puppet. When he becomes a puppet, it was impossible to make the people take him or treat with him seriously. So yes, please, can we see this episode, which called Last Days in Hell?
ماني مذنون. أنا مالي مذنون. أنا مالي مذنون، مالي مذنون، أنا مالي مذنون.
يا مدحة
يا محلاها الحرية، يا محلاها الحرية، يا محلاها الحرية، ويا محلاها الحرية، وسوريا نادت فيا رب السما محيية، سوريا ردوها عليا، يا محلاها الحرية،
سوريا حرية
وشامينا لا تهدمني بديك بروحي دير الزرق إلا دقيقة يلا يا الحرية يلا يا محلاها الحرية وطق وموت وبعصية والأسد فقد الشرعية راحت المحسوبية بثورتنا السلمية يا محلاها الحرية يا محلاها الحرية. أيها الشعب الثوري العظيم، يا شعبي، أقول لكم أنا فهمتكم، فهمت حمد الخطيب وهاجر وفهمت القاشوش وثميح شقير.
بس بنفس الوقت أحب أن أخبركم أنني لن أتنحى. لماذا؟ الكثير منكم الآن سيسألون هذا السؤال، وربما بعضكم سوف ينجلط. نعم، أقولها أنني لن أتنحى، لأني بعد أن اكتشفت أني أمتلك شعبا عظيما وشجاعا مثلكم فأنني لن أتركه. فلا تتعبوا لا تتعبوني معكم فمصيركم أن تبقوا في يدي، أن تبقوا عبيدا لي ولو غطت الدماء جبل قاسيون. صحيح، ولازم تعرفوا إنه ما في حدا رح يساعدكم لأنكم لحالكم بالعالم، أنا وياكم لحالنا. لذلك خلينا نقول 1 1 1، الشعب والرئيس واحد. باي باي. هاي انت عم تحكي معي؟ ايه؟ مين انت؟ انا الممثل. انا اللي بخليك موجود وبنفخ فيك الروح. هذا كلام اندثاثي. يا سيدي انا مندس. وليش انت مندس؟ انا مندس لاني تعبت منك. عرفت وانا مستني يصير شيء، ينصلح شيء. هرمت وانا حاملك. شو انت اجدد؟ في حدا بيحمل حدا هالايام؟ مزبوط، انت قلتها. ما حدا بيحمل حدا هاي الايام. بس انت رضيت بهذا الدور. ايه، انت رضيت انه انا احكي عنك وكون بدالك وخليك مانك موجود، اتنفس عنك واكل عنك واخذ قرارات عنك. لذلك اذا سمحت ارجع لتحت وخليني كمل حياتي. يلا لتشوف. عم اقول لك يلا لشوف. شو رح تعمل؟ شو رح اعمل؟ انا بخفيك. انا رئيس الجمهورية هون. يلا انزل تحت. لا انزل، والله بخفيك. بخليك ما تكون موجودة. حيوان حقير. شعر. انت بتعرف انه انا فيني خليك تعمل اللي بدي اياه؟ فيني خليك ترقص مثلا. اضحك، بس فيني خليك ترقص.
يا بشار ويا مندس، تضرب انت وحزب البعث. روح ظبط حرف الاس ويلا ارحل يا بشار. يلا ارحل يا بشار.
تركني. انت واحد حيوان مندس حقير. قاعدة. انت قاعدة. انت أسامة بن لادن. انت مخرب. انت كده. اسمع لك باسمي وباسم الشعب، باسم كل الناس اللي أذيتهم، باسم بكرة، باسم المستقبل، بقول لك يلا من هون ارحل. يا جماعة، هاي الخطوة الأسهل، صدقوني. الخطوة الأهم والأصعب إنه كيف نسامح ونبني سوريا حرة مدنية ديمقراطية. سوريا حرة.
Yes, it's exactly in this transformation when this group transform the dictator, I mean, into a puppet. They emphasize the idea of deconstructing the conventional idea of a dictator to reposition his power in people. And as we have seen here, how important was, I don't know, for an audience like you, I mean, who live far from Syria, I don't know to which extent you can imagine that kind of theater or of art prompts people into revolt. But when he pulls, I mean, the actor, when first he makes the president dance, and he dances on a song of the song that the demonstrators used to sing, and then he made him stop at the moment that the actor chooses. And then when he pulls off his head and we see the finger, only finger that was the support of this Assad, the support of this dictator, then the people will be encouraged to really break the barriers of fear, break and remove this godlike aura around the Assad. So, yeah, another collective, a remarkable, I would say, documentary film collective, Abu Nadara. This collective of self-taught and volunteer filmmakers involved in emergency cinema, used to, from the beginning of the uprising, since 2011, this collective has posted a short video on its Vimeo channel every week until this moment, as a tribute and contribution to the street protests. Their strategy in working is capturing life unaware and to tape life with no plans. I mean, as it is. That's why the collective uses portable cameras, natural light, footage, and these footages almost are of unplanned and unstructured events, mostly found footage, which the group later combined and manipulate so as to reveal the everyday life. The short videos of Abu Nadara, most of these videos, if not all of them, are with open-ending, demanding continued contemplation, demanding freedom of interpretation. Yes, usually the Abu Nadara, the collective, does not tape, does not record the events that is taking place, that is happening of the revolution, but the counter shots of the revolution, focusing on the impact of the violence, particularly on the children. I chose for you two short videos of the very recent, I mean, not old videos, but the ones which were made few years, a couple of years ago, and especially the video that is called Syria Today was made after, after the Syrian people were desperate by seeing the world and the international community with that kind of inaction towards what is happening and in Syria. So let's start with, let's show the first one, all the Syria's future.
مجموع قاعد مراسم يمينا نقدم سلاح حي
So this is an example of their work. I'm not, of course, going to impose my reading of this short video, but we can contemplate, we can think about it through the signs that are there. It's the final movement, the fourth movement of the Ninth Symphony of Beethoven, Ode to Joy, the poem of Schiller, and the final movement. So this can be something to think about. Then, when we advance with the video, and we see this huge this gate that opens widely, and all of a sudden it opens widely to blackout. Blackout, what does that mean? What is this blackout? What is this black? What do we see? And then these two lines that, sorry, it's just a technical problem. But they invited us to continue enjoying this. It can be really read in many different ways. And yes, by doing that, they are empowering people to think more, to understand, to link, to connect things. Yes, can we see please, the next one? It is the message to the whole world. This is Syria today and the people of Syria today. A message to the whole world. Yes, so finally, what I want to say that Syrian artists, by making art, they demonstrate that they are in position to the very attributes that the regime denies them. Agency, identity, diversity, intelligence, humor, beauty. And again, I don't know for the audience, I mean, for the kind of audience like you, who are looking in from outside. I think it's difficult to know if a song, if a video, if a story can prompt anyone to get involved, to get engaged in what is happening in Syria now. But perhaps you would agree with me that through arts, I'm sure Syria would be more understood and would be reported from different and various perspectives. I'm not illusioned, and I don't have illusions that art could change the world. No. When we were young, once we dreamt that art could do that. But I will tell you that art definitely activates critical thinking. And here is the thing. When you start criticizing, when you start looking at things from different perspectives, and when you start not taking things for granted, but question them, then for sure you will reach something. You will know something. You will gain different knowledge. And this happens with the help of the art. That's what I can say. And thank you for listening. And I hope you enjoyed, or let's say, not only enjoyed, perhaps you start thinking of, yes, art is a very important and effective, perhaps, tool. We have choices in life. We can have a rifle and use the rifle. At the same time, we can have our pencil and write. We can have our colors and paint. It's a choice. But Syrian artists had made their choice. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming, for attending, and for giving me this opportunity to share with you. Yes, I'm ready to.
Thank you so much, Naila. A really, really beautiful presentation. We'll take a 3-minute break, so be back at 10 minutes past the hour. And when we come back, we'll encourage some questions, some dialogue, some conversation that will be moderated by Azadeh. And yeah, we're looking forward to seeing you all when we get back in just a few minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, welcome back. We'll get started as soon as Naila rejoins us. And I just want to double check that everyone's got their sound on. Thank you so much. And Naila, we and I were talking just before this started, and she was expressing how she misses live interaction and getting the feedback of the audience as they're speaking. So please be as expressive as you can, using the chat box, using the Q&A function. And if you'd like to ask a question by speaking it out, use the raise hand function, and then we will use the function that would allow you to speak as well. But I'll hand over to Azadeh, who will be asking a few of the questions and moderating this portion.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone who wrote in the Q&A and in the chat box. Naila, I'll just start by reading some of the comments before I get to the questions. Sabah Amin writes, thank you so very much for opening my eyes and giving me so much to think about and further look at. Nitizia Arelli writes, thanks a lot. I feel inspired to encourage art in my country. Nitizia, if you could tell us where you're writing from, that would be wonderful. She also asked, how would I start a similar movement in my country? She writes, I'm from a country where violence is also a big deal, and I would like to encourage people to start making change through art. So Naila, do you have any suggestions for Nitizia on how she can encourage people in a country where she also experiences violence to make change through art?
To make how, you know, we don't have recipe. I don't have recipe, but what I know that don't be afraid. That it's very important, you know, to reject any kind of fear, because these despotic and these authoritarian regimes, they want us to feel fear. They want us to live in fear, because fear paralyzes and does not give us the ability to think. It blocks our minds, you know. So first of all, I would say, you know, I don't know if I'm in a situation to advise, but I would say, don't be afraid. If you believe in something, you do it. But you should know that you may sacrifice a lot, you know. It's not an easy thing. I don't know other than that, you know, to say how to bring people through art to, we should go to people, telling the story, I think is a tool that helps a lot, because, you know, by telling the story, you people can really, when they hear you and they hear your story, can initiate perhaps a kind of change in their moral sensibility, you know, and perhaps they can start doing something. So that's what I can say. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nitizia. We hope that answered your question and that you will heed Naila's advice not to be afraid and to continue to tell stories and to bring about awareness. Our next question comes from one of our attendees who asks, my question is, do you think that artistic contestation is effective today in mobilizing people and spreading awareness? What are the deficiencies and potential challenges, and how can we overcome them? So do you think this is an effective way of mobilizing people?
Do I believe that it's effective? I do believe that is effective. It is because it's very simple. The thing is very simple. It is because art open up questions. Art help us to open up questions. In opening questions, we gain knowledge. The knowledge free us. What it means to know why I feel I'm responsible as an artist to let people know, because in knowledge they free themselves, you know, and start knowing. Yes, I do, of course, believe. And what the potential of change, yes, there is a potential of change, but that comes, I mean, in process of time. We need to believe and to have the faith. And yes, in process of time, I believe the change would come.
Wonderful. So Naila, if I could actually ask you a question as an extension. So in your view, is the kind of knowledge and awareness that art brings about, does that stand in contrast to violence and oppression? In other words, do you see knowledge and critical thinking as a powerful source and as
powerful, excuse me, as
a powerful source and as an antidote to oppression and violence?
Yes, because what is the other choice? As I said, what is the other choice? If I have someone who is, you know, pointing a weapon, a rifle against me, if I repeat, or if I react in the same way, then what will happen? Then the cycle of the violence will continue. So finding another tool to confront this violence, I think would, and that again, in the long term, would curtail the violence. But facing violence with violence is never successful. It will lead us to a cycle no one can get out of it.
Yes, indeed. I'll turn to the next question. This is posed by Mehdi, who writes, "Art is a language. I knew that, but I live far away from the country this is happening in. And I am really grateful to hear those beautiful different perspectives." Actually, that was a comment and not a question. This one is, in a global world dominated by mass media and digital networks, can we assume that artistic activism is losing its prominence in front of media activism?
Well,
so how do you see the relationship?
Well, it does. Well, it does. Yes, of course. And it's sometimes, and in different parts of the world, it's badly affected. Yes, I can't deny that. But when I insist on the art, the kind of art I make, which activates critical thinking, which means the critical thinking that lead to questions. That means that I don't take things for granted. Mass media, and the official medias, at that time, when we start activating our own way of thinking, we will stop giving an ear to these kind of, to the mass medias that try to mobilize people in a certain way. This is very important, not always that what does art make. It encourages you to have your own voice and to make your mind about things, to compare. Perhaps, yes, we can. It's not an easy war, it's not an easy battle, not at all. But we need to, to make it, we need to start it. We need to,
Thank you so much. I'll share with you two other comments we received. One person writes, "Thank you for this insightful webinar, so inspiring." And another one writes, "Incredible, so powerful. Thank you for sharing." So thank you so much, Naila.
Thank you. It's I who should thank you, because yes, as I said, as in my telling the stories, I need listeners and I need people to come and see. It's yes, it's gaining, when you gain new audiences that hears and that grows more aware of what is happening in the world and what is happening in my country. That what I, that what concerns me in particular. I should be thankful. I should be really thankful.
Well, really, we can go on thanking each other, but I have to say that one thing that I really learned through this process is the incredible, powerful artworks that are being created. And in them, I had a sense that there is so much love, there is so much resilience in the Syrian people. And I really sincerely hope that there is an end to the incredible suffering that has been going on for the past decade. And if the art is any indication, there is just tremendous care, humanity, love, and resistance that I think we can really all learn from. Because there is a way to look at artworks, and you referred to this a few times in your presentation, which is that as viewers who are either not living in Syria or not necessarily familiar with the history and with the political context, we have to remember that conflict and everything that we see in the world, even though it may feel far away, can also only be steps away from our own door. And there is an incredible amount of wisdom and insight that these artworks and these struggles can teach us. So thank you so much for teaching us today, for introducing us to the wonderful artists. We didn't get to hear that much about each individual artist, and whether they are in Syria or abroad, and but we wish them all well, and may we invite you back another time and really celebrate the fruition of the struggle and the ideals of freedom, of individuality, and hopefully one day you can return. And
I hope so. I too hope so. Yeah. It's this is that I hope it doesn't become a far dream. I mean, a dream that we won't be able to really to make it happen. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you, Naila. It's really been a pleasure. And we hope that you stay in touch with us.
Yes, I will for sure. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. Aslam?
Thank you, Aslam, and thank you, Alyssa.
Yes, thank you, Alyssa, for the tech support and helping to put this together, and to everybody who attended. We really appreciate your attendance, especially as we think about what's called the attention economy, and so many competing things for your eyeballs and your attention. But we appreciate the time that you spent with us today. And thank you, Naila, for all that you shared. Please do subscribe to the CCMS newsletter. Look out on our social media for upcoming events. And this partnership and opportunity to be with the Scholars at Risk program has been an incredible learning opportunity for us, and we're privileged to be able to share some of that work. So thank you all again, and we hope you have a lovely Friday and a good weekend.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.